Bingo Blitz rules.
If your bingo has ads in it,
That's not a bingo.
if it doesn't have the coolest tournaments, mini games, and the most breathtaking design,
Nope, not a bingo.
if your bingo moment makes you feel so excited that you just want to burst in joy and scream out loud, bingo! Sorry, so you're playing...
Bingo Blitz? Now that's a bingo. Go for a world of excitement with Bingo Blitz, the #1 free bingo game. Download Bingo Blitz and play for free.
Now that's a bingo.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Let's hang out. Let's hang out. And let's talk about what legends have found. Let's hang out. And let's listen to two lesbians shout. Let's hang out. Let's hang out.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Let's Hang Out, the podcast where historians will call them close friends, besties, roommates, colleagues, anything but lovers. History hates lovers.
Beautiful intro.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of something that was on brand and that felt on
Very
brand
on
for what
brand.
we're going to talk
Absolutely.
about.
Absolutely.
From the West Coast, I'm Leigh Holmes
From the East
Foster.
Coast, I'm Ellie Brigida. To those of you who have been with us through this whole journey, thank you as always for listening. If you're a new listener, welcome. We're excited to have you here. Here's what's happening this week. This Week in the Lesdom. This Week in the Lesdom is a place where we can touch base each episode about things going on with the podcast or otherwise. We always like to remind you that we have a Patreon and we love our Patreon supporters. You can join at bit.ly/lespatreon if you want to get access to all of our bonus episodes. Our bonus episodes catalog is continuing to grow. Our last episode was on Nimona. We got some really great feedback on that one. And our next one will be on Miseducation of Cameron Post.
Lots of good stuff. We also want to remind everyone we are getting so close to our Croatia trip. It is coming up in just a few weeks, basically, at this point.
Which is insane. We've been talking about it for so long. I can't believe I'm actually going to be in Croatia in a few weeks.
It's crazy.
Wild.
Some of you also may have seen that we are starting to plan our next trip as well. We want to do another one, maybe do something like on this hemisphere, to
keep it a little closer for our US listeners. See if we can make it a little easier for people to get there, a little more accessible. So keep an eye out for that one.
And keep an eye on our social medias because we've been posting either polls or links to our Trova Trip survey, which you can always get your answers in. Let us know where you want to go as we plan more trips. We are super, super psyched about that.
And keep an eye on our socials to see all of our fun Croatia activities we'll be posting on our stories. I'm sorry for all the FOMO that you're going to have, but
lots of
we
good
wish
stuff
you were there
coming up.
too.
In the Greater Les universe, first, we want to also just give a quick shout out. There are still SAG and WGA strikes going on. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So as you go through the season with us, as obviously you'll see some changes to our episode topics and stuff like that. We just want to remind you, obviously, pay your actors and pay your writers to the studios. It's ridiculous. So yeah, there's that.
In better queer representation news, Harley and Ivy. So Harley and Ivy from the Harley Quinn animated series are currently the longest running queer couple on TV. For 4 seasons, they have been running. So they are not canceled yet. Don't cancel them, you motherfuckers. Do not cancel them. Let them keep running. But it's still, I'm happy. We got some Harley Ivy ships going on.
They're on HBO, right? And
yes.
I feel like with their whole HBO, I do not have a ton of faith in these days.
I know, but fingers crossed. They've been up for 4 seasons. They're still kicking. So let's keep it that way.
Okay. I'll try to have hope.
Yes, try to have hope. With that, that's what's happening this week. Back to you, Ellie and Leigh.
Thanks, Ellie and Leigh. We are so excited to bring you our second episode of Season 7, Straightforward.
And we are very excited to be joined by 2 special guests today that I personally went to college with, which is very exciting. Billy Aberle and Chris Sabol are here. Hi, Billy and Chris.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
So good to see you.
I know.
It's
It's really
be
good
so
to see you too. It's been too long.
It has
really
been
has.
far too long. And for those of
Yeah, it's been so
been
long
so
for
long
me
since Leigh
too.
saw you,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Wow, like ages. I'm in it. I'm
You've been
with
there, you've been
this. I'm a part of this.
I feel like this is the perfect venue to like catch up in. Like,
Yeah, why
It
not?
really
Why
is.
not?
I'm
Yeah.
like, literally, I'm just going to be an hour being like, so what have you been up to? And it's just gay shit. And so it's perfect. This is it. Gay
Here are the
musical
things-
shit. That's what I want to hear about.
Dreams come true.
The things you need when catching up with old friends. 1, wine. Billy, you're ready.
I've got
2,
it.
microphones. We're all prepared. We're all ready.
Yes. And for those of you who are listening, I want to let you know who Billy and Chris are and why we have them on the show, because they're both wildly talented. They are the writers and producers of Straightforward, which is a new musical based on a true story that captured attention across social media. Now, Billy and Chris, will you tell us about that article? Because I feel like the article is like, what a great story to write a musical about. I'm super pumped about it. And very gay.
Billy thought so too, yeah.
Yeah, so I usually let Chris take the reins on telling kind of like the story of how it all came about. So Chris, why don't you start and I'll pop in at points.
Yeah, so I think a lot of us like read this article when it came out, and this is going back like 10 years, almost 10 years now. And we had just seen Fun Home, which was on Broadway at the time. And we were like looking for something to collaborate on and write together. We were just like at a bar, like after viewing Fun Home. And like to this day, like Fun Home is like still one of my favorite musicals ever. But we were chatting about how we had both separately read this article, but we hadn't really talked about it. And Billy was like, this article would actually it would make a great musical. And I was like, yeah, it would. But, like it's based off of real people. So like you can't just, we can't just do it. We have to get them involved and they're not going to want to do it. And Billy was like, I'm going to email them and I'm going to tell them that we are musical theater writers. And that we want to write a musical about their lives. And I said, you know what? You go ahead and do that. And if they respond and they give us permission, I'll do it with you. And he was like, okay. So he emails my guy, Ellie, and he responds and says they're interested in meeting. And we drove up to Boston like that summer and we sat with him and his now husband, Garrett, for probably 4 hours, like over 2 separate days in Boston. And they kind of just like, we recorded it audio and they sort of just like bared their souls to us. And we took what they said and we turned it into this musical. So that's sort of how we arrived here.
I love 2 things specifically right now about that story. One is that I feel like Ellie and I joke all the time that we're like, there's nothing more millennial than what we did, which is to be like, oh my God, we should start a podcast one day. But also I feel like the gayer version of that is also what we've done. Which is we should write a musical. Yeah, it's like it feels very on brand and I love that. The other thing is I love that I can already tell that Billy's the Ellie in this duo and that makes me happy as well. That just like, I'm just going to do this crazy thing. And then Chris, you're just like, yeah, okay. I'll go along with that if that happens. Yeah, why not?
We had a 2-hour call before this when we were testing our microphones out for this. And he was like, we're going to be doing this, and this. Like, these are the next steps, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I don't think we can do that. Like, how are we going to do that? Like, but that's sort of what I said when he was like, we're going to bring this to Theater Row and we're going to bring it Off-Broadway and it's going to do fine and it's going to be great. And I was like, I don't know how we're gonna do this all, and like here we are.
You're the me. You're the me, and I love it.
I think everyone
makes me happy.
Though. Everyone needs this juxtaposition of like someone who's like, this is the crazy thing we're gonna do, and someone who's like, okay, well, how?
Right.
Let's be real
exactly
about it. Yeah.
And then you figure out the how, and it's fine. Can we go back a little bit? Can you explain what is in the article for anyone who might not have read the article? Like what happened to these 2 people?
Spark Notes.
Right?
Spark Notes.
Yeah. So basically, the story revolves around these 2 people, which is actually one of the songs in our show. Mike Iamele actually wrote the article, and basically the entire thing encompasses basically like 6 months of their lives when they're in college and just post after college, when one of the main characters, Mike, is just dealing with a lot of stress at work. He climbed the corporate ladder very quickly, owned his own business, but like right after he graduated college, and just through dealing with that, he started like drinking and doing drugs and just like all this other stuff. And he basically just like, his body was giving up on him. He got diagnosed with severe pancreatitis. He was basically dying. You know, he went to all these different doctor's appointments, and he was roommates with this guy, Garrett, at the time. So in a nutshell, Garrett was in pharmacy school at the time. So he kind of like had all of this like doctor knowledge and everything. So while they were living together, he was taking care of him. And through turn of events and everything, they just develop this relationship between one another that they can't really identify, because up until this point in the timeline that our show takes place, they both identify as straight men, and they're both dating girls. The one, Garrett, has a long-term girlfriend, and they just decide to see where it can go. Like they both acknowledge the feelings that they both have for one another. And that's what our show is about. It's about that 6 months of time where they're just kind of like exploring these feelings and seeing what could come of it in the end. And I won't give away any spoilers in the end, but that's pretty much the span of time.
I mean, anyone who remembers the article, though, like, it's not...
Yeah.
Is it a spoiler if it happened in 2014 or whatever?
Yeah.
I think the whole point of it, though, is, like, not the fact that they ended up together, but the whole... The musical encompasses, like, the very messy part of, like, what they had to go through to get there. Like, it's not necessarily, like, the ending, but, like, what the external and internal pressures were for them to get to the point that they are today.
Exactly,
and I think that's like the meat of the story.
Right.
Which is also very funny to say as a lesbian, because when you read the article, right, and because I do actually remember when the article came out, like I remember reading it a long time ago, but it's funny when you read it, and I mean, I know it wasn't at the time, but it's presented very straightforwardly, but where he's just like, oh, I just decided like I had to tell him how I felt. Yeah. So I stood up and was like, I think I'm in love with
Exactly,
you.
yeah.
And I'm sorry, have you not met lesbians? Like, I literally had a conversation yesterday with a friend about the time she accidentally dated a girl for 3 months and didn't know about it, you know? Like,
and that's the thing. It's just like, you know, when we actually interviewed them, you know, it became very clear that it wasn't so straightforward like that, you know? Like,
I'm sure it was not.
It was this gigantic span of time where it was just like, you know, they talk about emailing each other back and forth because it's more comfortable to get their thoughts out. They talk about, you know, like Garrett, like cleaning up his blood in the bathroom because he was like throwing up blood at the time from this disease that he has. You know, it's so much more than what the article puts forward. But, you know, it was enough to capture Chris and I's attention. And just a quick story on that. So when we were like finding all the roles for this current production that we're running, so we got this one submission from this girl who remembered reading the article when it first came out and identified as straight as at the time. But once she read that article, she actually like went through that herself and like confessed her love for like her best friend, and then now they're dating.
Stop it.
Yeah.
I
so
love
it's just like it touched so many people, you know, like it's so relatable, and you know, it really affected a lot of people at the time and still does.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing too, like about why we were like, let's talk about this on the podcast, because it's like, yes, this musical is awesome and like everyone should go see it. But I also feel like there's like such a relatable.
So yes,
this is the most like relatable queer experience.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
At some point, we all were quote unquote straight.
Yep.
At some like it's like you sort of, that's like the benchmark to which we are held up to, and then you have to have this experience of like working through these feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that like both of these people came into this experience being straight, right? I feel like we've explored like, I'm a queer person who like falls in love with a straight girl, and you're like, oh shit, she's straight and now I have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
But to have like both of them be dealing with that at the same time also like gives it a different dynamic, I feel like also.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of not just like one person's pining for the other, of like, okay, we're both feeling this, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay, but this is what I'm going to say, like, because you just said it's a very relatable gay story, and my question is it relatable, or does it feel relatable because it is the basis for like 90% of every fan fiction out there, right? Where it's just like every non-canon fan fiction that starts out as like, you might think I'm straight if you've watched the show, but maybe I'm not, and maybe they're not either. I don't know. I think it's relatable in that way. Right?
I think we've tried to walk the fine line of that because we are aware of those types of I don't know if you want to call it like tropes, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think,
but it can't be a trope if it's real life. Like, it actually happened.
And like, that's the
right?
thing is like, so we've been getting feedback obviously from this past week, and like most of it has been extremely positive. We did get a couple that were not, like, they weren't scathing, but they weren't 100% positive either, and a lot of it was like, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, right? But like, it came across as like, gay people don't act this way, and so like my response to that is, well, how are gay people supposed to act then? Like, you know, you have these two guys who we've taken their, you know, their likeness and their experience, and we've put it on stage, and it's their experience, and it's their coming to terms with who they are. How is that not acceptable to other people? You know what I mean? And so that's one of the challenges that I think that we've run into. And I'm not, it's not a mountain. It's like, you know, but it's, it's something that we've been questioned about, but I think that it's important to have that discussion. Like, it's not, you know, just because, like, you know, for example, there's you know, like towards the beginning of the musical, like you're seeing their friendship, so you're seeing a lot of this like bro-y out stuff, right? And so a lot of people, you know, like there may be some people that watch that and go, why are they acting like this? And it's like, well, because this is what it was. And so like, we want to be able to portray that, you know, like they were not coming to terms with who they are, and now they have, but like, we want to see that journey from start to finish, you know? Right.
And, you know, rolling off of that as well, it's so good that even people say stuff like that, because it sparks these conversations that we get to have, you know? And it's just like, well, why were you really feeling that way? Like, why do you think that these actors have to portray these characters a certain way on stage, and we like get to talk about it? And that's exactly why we set out to write a musical, you know, because art always like challenges things, and just the fact that there's people that have different views about like what is happening on stage is like, that's gold to us, you know? We're like, let's talk about it, let's you know, like, bring it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they should be discussing it, right? If they're not discussing it, then like, what's the point of it?
Right, exactly.
Right, like, literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious, like, I mean, I knew both of you in college, but like, I don't know, honestly. Like, I mean, I think all of us came out at college at some point.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. Did you, Chris?
I came out probably in my, like, right after college. Like, I wasn't out in college.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Think.
I always forget that.
Yeah.
I think I was sophomore year or junior year. I think it was sophomore year.
Yeah, because it was my junior year as well. So like, I mean, all of us also knew each other in a stage of life where we were not out.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right.
Where
which
we
is like
weren't who we are now.
Which is sort of.
And me too. I'm just going to keep inserting myself.
I was going to ask Leigh. I was coming to you next.
It's fine. No one cares.
No.
I'm just waiting for the next person to come through the door on Ellie's side.
I know. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm like,
I can't wait to see who it is.
I'm on my family vacation, and like 3 of my family members have already come through the door. And I literally,
listen,
I told you,
in
stay out of my
10 minutes,
studio.
my kids will run through this door. It'll be fine. It'll be great.
But I mean, I guess like my question to you is like, just because I find that fascinating that like we did know each other in those times of our lives. And
yeah, what was straight Ellie like?
Well, no, you don't have to say that, but but I don't know. It's like it's bringing me back like to that part of my life, right? And like it is messy, like it is like you're not quite yourself, and like
no,
that's also okay. Like, you know, like to be like, oh, Leigh and I talk about this a lot. Like coming out stories, like we definitely have had so many of them. So it's like, okay, sometimes you're like, there's plenty of other things to the gay experience besides just coming out, right? However, like it is an experience that we all have.
A ubiquitous part of the gay experience, yeah.
Like there's 0 people who are now gay who never had to come out, right? Mm-hmm. And I think like, yeah, like we tell those stories because they're all also different and nuanced.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm like, I don't know what my question is there, but I'm just like thinking about it. Or like, how was that experience for both of you personally? Like you don't have to give any like super personal details, but like when you're writing this musical, you can. I mean, but did it bring you back to that part of your life?
Oh my God.
I'm going to let Chris take this one. Yeah.
Like the music in this show is literally about me. It is about, and like, I think the reason that this article rang so true to just me in general was because like I felt the way that Mike and Garrett felt. And so I had to go back to that point in my life to write these songs. And they were not points of my life that I really care to go back to. So it was, it was hard work to do that. And I mean, I'm happy I did it because I'm really proud of the work that we've done on the musical. But I mean, the songs, like, I've had friends that sort of like knew me during that time, in college, that came to see the show, and they were like, so a lot of those songs that Garrett sings, like, those are about you, aren't they? And I was like, yeah, they are. So like people who know me will know that like that was like, it's kind of obvious. But I think that as like musical theater writers, we sort of like, we get this shield where we can be like, oh, well, it's not about me, it's about them, and so, but I think there's like it's a universal story. Like it is Mike and Garrett's story, but there are people, including myself, like who felt this way,
right? And going back to that as well, so like Chris during this entire process, and he kind of like separated himself from Mike and Garrett's story actually a little bit, whereas like I was the one that really like attached to that and pulled that part into it. And it's interesting to see like everything just like come together and how our stories are so similar and everything. But yeah, we both had different experiences writing the show, which is also interesting considering we both did it,
I didn't speak to them. Like not in a bad way. Like I would jump on calls with them and stuff, but like the regular day-to-day like process of emailing them or updating them always went through Billy. If I didn't have to answer an email, I wouldn't. Like I would say a bulk of the score was written like after we came back. Well, when we came back from Boston, I was like, okay, I got the gist. This is where the beats need to be. This is what the songs are about. And I sort of dug into myself, and I think that made the songs more universal, that other people could latch onto them and not so specific necessarily to them. Whereas like Billy working on the script had to be a little bit more involved in their lives. We're great friends now. I talk to them now.
You're like, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
Don't even look at me.
Yeah.
No, they're great. They were both at opening
amazing,
night.
yeah.
They are so involved in this project. Like they're not musical theater or even just theater people at all. Like when we started this with them, they were like, just so you know, like,
yeah,
we don't do this, So like, we're really like putting this in your hands. And, that was good and bad for us, like in different ways. But like right now, they're so involved, and they're just, now I think they would consider themselves musical theater fans because they love the show so much. They were there on opening night. They're going to be there tomorrow for a talk back. They just love being a part of it all. It's really great.
Would you ever get them to sing anything,
awesome.
or it's like, that would be so bad?
I don't think so, but
they sing it to each other like in private. But
probably,
like,
yeah.
I'm sure.
Don't put
In the shower,
do
in the shower.
not
There you
put
go.
this anywhere public.
I think the other thing too is that they have been like so gracious when like maybe we not, the story is intact and the story is theirs, but we all know on this call as writers that sometimes you need to embellish for the stage a bit to make things more dramatic and engaging for the audience. And like, so we were initially concerned and worried about what they would think about some of the minor things that we added. And they were just like really good about it. Like they said that they had like a, you know, come to terms moment where they were like, you know what, we just have to let this be what it is and just accept that this is based off of us, but it's also not 100% us. And I think that is such a joy to be able to work with two individuals that not only understand that, but are willing to accept that, because like if you're working on a real true story, you may run into issues with the subject matter if they're not willing to budge, you know?
Yeah,
Yep, totally.
I'm curious, Chris, because you were talking about like how much this hit home and like digging back in through some of that, writing these songs. And I'm curious too, because as obviously I've known for a long time, but everyone else might not have. You mentioned that you just came out after college. And I'm curious because like one of the things about the story that I always think is interesting to me, like way back when the article first came out too, is like some of it I think was a little bit a product of the times, but some of it is still true today. And part of why something else that I think we'll sort of transition into about like why stories like this are so important is that this wasn't just presented as the story of like, here's two guys who fell in love, right? Like, here's two gay dudes, they fell in love. Because that wasn't at all the presentation of it. The presentation was very much like, here are two straight men. Like, here are two established, known straight men, right, who fell in love with each other. And so I feel like a lot of us as queer people will look at that and say, like, okay, so they weren't, like, obviously totally straight, right? I mean, but I think that there is this idea still to this day, and certainly a decade ago, of, like, what are the acceptable ages to realize things about yourself, right? Like, what are the acceptable ages to explore your sexuality, question things? And what are the ages past which you're like, no, you're straight now. Like, you've decided, you got your cards stamped, like you have checked in to work as a straight person now, and like that's your identity, and anything you do now to change it is like, whoa, right? And because I think we still, like, we have guests on now still who will talk about like, oh yeah, like I came out later in life, you know, and it's a very different idea of that identity. And like, obviously right out of college is, you know, I don't think quite at that same line, but I am curious, you know, if that felt like an important part to you, because it is something that I know always stood out to me, like way back reading the article back in the day, is like it's interesting to me that it's not just the story of like, hey, here's two guys who like happened to fall in love and they were roommates. It was always very harped on in the way the articles were presented, whether it's by, you know, their choice or just how the media was at the time, of like, they're straight. They were straight men. They had girlfriends. They had girlfriends and they fell in love, you know? And I'm like, well, that's actually still possible.
Right, yeah.
Like,
not only that, but when we talk to Mike and Garrett today, like Mike always says, and he'll say to this day, like, if for whatever reason they broke up in the future, like, they don't know if they would date another man, you know? And they'll say that if they were on the interview right now, you know?
Which also still doesn't make you not queer.
Totally. Yeah,
at all,
right,
you know?
Absolutely.
And I think one of the other reasons that they were so willing to talk to us about this was because you just said of the media and how the media sort of spinned this, you know, like NPR was calling them, like, you know, all these different news outlets, and they were spinning the story in a way that just like wasn't accurate to who they were. And they felt that like, okay, well, if these guys are going to come and like sit down with us for like 4 hours, like maybe we have a shot to getting this accurate somehow. And they were also sort of intrigued about the idea that's like, okay, well, this is something different. Like, everybody else wants to do a news article or a, you know, like a NPR piece on us, but these guys want to write a full-fledged musical. So like, let's see what this one's all about.
I think they told us that they hadn't accepted any interviews besides ours just because of the nature of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Because people were like hounding them for like different reasons and different motivations. And we were just
Yeah.
like, we really love your story. Let's adapt it for the stage. And we were just like these fresh little faces out of college, like had never written a musical before. And they were just really interested in it. So
That's amazing.
I was going to say, to answer the question that you asked, I do believe that the line of like identifying as straight or not straight, right? Like we are now having this conversation, I think, even more and more now about how, you know, sexuality can be more fluid. And I think one of the major themes of our musical is that like society and like all of these external pressures are putting these, are sort of putting these pressures on us to say, well, this is how your life is supposed to go. You're supposed to get a wife. You're supposed to have kids. You're supposed to do all this. And like, you don't really even think about it or question the possibility of something else. Right. And so that is like what this story sort of brings to the table. And I think that's important. And and not to get, like too, political, but I'll do it.
Do it.
Like when we first started writing this musical, like it felt like we were in a better place. Like in 2015, we're seeing Obergefell get passed. Like there's more acceptance for LGBTQ people. In a sense, like since then, like we're going backwards in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You're seeing all of these anti-LGBTQ bills going through in all of these different states, like specifically targeting trans folks. And like not that our musical deals with trans folks, but like it should be like we should allow people to be and experience and love the way that they want to. And I know that sounds like so corny and cheesy, but like that's sort of why it's called Straightforward, because this relationship and what they want to do should be straightforward, but it's not.
Yeah.
And it's because of all of these other.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And as we head into Thanksgiving time, I want to start by thanking my wife, Kelsey, who has not only listened to just about every episode of this podcast for 8 seasons now, but who also is the only reason I'm able to make time to record it every week. She takes the kids, gets them dinner, and gets them ready for bed, just so that Ellie and I can come on and yell about gay things into each other's faces for an hour. So here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people you're grateful for in your life, including yourself. I've been in therapy for a long time now, and one thing that's so important about therapy is how it teaches you to be more intentional. And being intentional about gratitude and how to show that to the people you appreciate is just one of the many benefits that I've gotten from therapy over the years. If you've been thinking of starting therapy, consider giving BetterHelp a try. I know how hard it can be to find time for regular therapy, and BetterHelp is designed to be flexible and convenient for your schedule. You can fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. If you want to start being more intentional about gratitude in your life, visit betterhelp.com/leshangout today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/leshangout.
Let's hang out.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states. For many businesses, the holiday season can be both an exciting and stressful time. With so many balls in the air, one thing you definitely want to know you can rely on is how you're selling your products. And with Shopify, you can rest easy knowing it's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. And when it comes to successful brands like Aloe, Allbirds, or Skims, an often overlooked secret is all the things that go on behind the scenes that make selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, if you take a peek behind that curtain, you'll see that Shopify is what makes it all possible. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, so that's more happy customers and way more sales going. It's true all the time, but especially this time of year, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use for Realm merch with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm. For many businesses, the holiday season can be both an exciting and stressful time. With so many balls in the air, one thing you definitely want to know you can rely on is how you're selling your products. And with Shopify, you can rest easy knowing it's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. And when it comes to successful brands like Aloe, Allbirds, or Skims, an often overlooked secret is all the things that go on behind the scenes that make selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, if you take a peek behind that curtain, you'll see that Shopify is what makes it all possible. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, so that's more happy customers and way more sales going. It's true all the time, but especially this time of year, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use for Realm merch with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
Things that are happening, whether it's a politician trying to get in between into your bedroom, or, you know, like family pressures or whatever the case may be. And so it still remains complicated, right? And so when we get asked, like, why did you do this? You know, I think that's what sort of sets ours apart from, you know, like, I love all the like Netflix stuff that's coming out now, like Heartstopper and all these things. I wish I had something like that growing up, right? But sometimes it's not. And you guys would probably agree with me. It's not as, you know, as it doesn't always go that way, you know?
Yeah.
No, but I think, but exactly like what you were just saying. And especially, you know, I can't remember if we had started rolling, you know, yeah, I think you mentioned Fun Home at the top of the episode. Even when you look at something like Fun Home, right? And Fun Home is so very much a story built on the idea that, like, it can be too late, right? Like, it was too late for her dad. Like, he was never going to get that chance to have the queer life that maybe he would have had if he'd grown up in a different time, right? And you watch Fun Home, and I think Fun Home, like so many other queer stories, and again, like, yeah, nothing against them. I mean, we eat that shit up. We love gay media of all kinds, but like, there are so many queer stories in the media that are based around your coming out in high school, in college, right? Like, I'm having these thoughts. I'm sitting up at night dreaming, and what is going through my mind, right? And I think it's why, like, when you look at things like this, it does feel very important to have stories about the idea that, hey, actually, you can be a grown-ass adult with a life and a job and a girlfriend.
Had never thought that before.
Have never had that thought cross your mind, and it still might. And when it does, that's okay, right? Like, whether it turns out that you are actually in love with your roommate or not, like, entertaining the thought is actually okay and good and healthy, right? Like, that's still a good idea. But it is one that I think is it's interesting because I think of how the media did latch onto that idea of, like, oh my God, these two straight men fell in love. Like, you know, very like tabloid-esque kind of way to present it. And you're like, because I think that's what makes a lot of straight people feel more comfortable with the fact that they're like,
Oh,
what
yeah, but
is
they're like, couldn't
this?
be
Right?
me.
Like, right. Yeah, exactly. They're like, can you imagine? And like a lot of queer people are like, yeah, that's how that happens. Like, that's exactly what happens whether you're 16 or like 50. It doesn't super matter.
Yeah.
But the idea is like, and that's, you should be okay. You should be okay with that. It's okay if that happens, you know? Like,
yeah, I do find it very like interesting and also depressing that you say like we've moved backwards, because this is our 7th season of the podcast. So we've been making a gay podcast for 7 years. And I can agree with you. There were certain years of making this podcast where I was like, we're doing great. This is super awesome. Look at us go. And the past few
everything is awesome.
And honestly,
it's not that
few
anymore.
years have been really rough. Rough. And so it is, I think, a very important time to be telling gay stories.
I think it sort of changed the stakes of why we wrote it. Like, because, you know, when we started writing it, it was probably around the same time that you guys started doing this podcast. And we were like, exactly the same. Like, these stories need to be told, like, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, now it's like, these stories need to be told. You know, it's just like a completely different, like, you know, and so it's, you know, I think it wasn't necessarily the intention, but it's just, that's sort of like, I guess the interesting thing about theater is that as you're writing this thing and times change and time goes by and different things happen, you know, it's going to be relatable in different ways to different folks.
That one guy that wrote the review for us that said it was dated or whatever, I was like, first of all, I was like, how dare you? Second of all, I was like, no, it's not. You know, like, just because it happens a few years ago, like Rent isn't, sure, it's like dated, like it happens in the 80s, but like people still do Rent, you know, like it's all relevant, like it all has a story to be told, you know. So I don't know, that just like pissed me off. Dated, come on.
You should be listening to this.
I don't care. Listen to it.
Well, but speaking of the time it took to get there, I want to ask a totally very self-indulgent question, which is like, tell us a little bit about the process of being like, let's write a musical, to where you're at now, like having it staged, having the run. Like, what was that process like?
Long and tiring, and
sounds right.
I'm gonna be tired for the rest of my life. And no, I always like to start with so the reason that we actually came to this story as well was because, like, coming out of college, like, Chris and I, we knew that we wanted to write a musical, and we knew that we wanted to write something, you know, but we had no idea where to start. And at the time, we actually reached out for advice to Pasek and Paul. And this was just when they had like Dogfight out, like Dear Evan Hansen wasn't a thing, Greatest Showman wasn't a thing, they didn't blow up. And they wrote us back like paragraphs of just like advice on writing a musical, especially for the first time. And one of the pieces of advice was find a story that like already exists, that you could like latch onto, that you can like get details about, that you don't have to create something from scratch and then turn that into a musical, at least for the first one. So that's where we kind of like set our eyes on, like finding a story that already existed, that we could like talk to people about, that like we get information and like build our story from there. And that's how we found the article, you know, that's how we found it on Facebook. And we said, hey, this would make a great musical. But then as far as everything from there, I don't know. It's a gigantic blur. Yeah.
Well, I would say the bulk of, you know, like obviously the interviews were super, super helpful. And we wrote probably a handful of songs, and then did a little bit of a markup on a script. And like the original idea was going to be like a 6 to 8 person musical. There were going to be other moving parts like in this
that are actual characters in the story.
Right. And then we were like, maybe this just needs to be a 2-person show, because then we can really sort of dive into like what is happening to the two of them without seeing the external stuff that's happening, but it could be a part of the story and we can feel it as the audience, but in a way that isn't taking away from their story. That was probably the smartest decision we made on doing this, because everybody always asks like, how did you produce this? And like, you know, it's, as you know, like it's very expensive to produce theater, and you know, a 2-person musical, like when you're looking at, you know, dollars and cents is a lot easier. I'm not going to say it wasn't hard. It was extremely hard, but
it's not lame
you know, it's not lame, right? But I don't know. I kind of prefer it this way, because I really do think that we have narrowed it down to like what these guys really went through, and like someone who saw the show said that they felt like they were watching something that they shouldn't be watching, like because it was like the most intimate, like private moments of their lives, so they almost felt like it was wrong to be watching it, which I thought was great. Yeah. But I would also say like a bulk of it was written, I think, like in 2020. Like that's really Billy and I started having like weekly, daily Zooms where we were
COVID
just like
hit, when
really,
we just like had
when COVID
time.
hit,
Yeah.
And then we worked, like the first thing we workshopped it at Wagner with SRMT, actually.
Nice.
The current people that run it, they're I guess, well, that was 2 years ago, so they don't run it anymore. But when they were there, they were great to work with. So we did a reading in like November of 21. We refined it again after that, after we got feedback, and then we brought it to the New York Theater Festival in the summer of 22. And then we refined it again. And then now this is the version that we're presenting Off-Broadway. So I guess that was the long answer to your question of like, it takes a really long time, like to write a musical. It's just, and I'm sure it's, I mean, we've already had meetings. It's going to change again.
What are some of the biggest things you've changed
from
the beginning? Like, let's say like from the first iteration to now.
Ooh,
like from before you did it at Wagner.
Well, we really expanded it for the most part. I think when we did it at Wagner, it was only like 9 songs, and now it's like 20. So it at least doubled since Wagner. New York Theater Festival, we added about 15 minutes to the show, which is funny because now our goal for this time around is actually, We were expecting it to run like an hour 40, and it's running 2 hours with no intermission. So we're kind of just like, we're going to see if we can squeeze it in a little bit, which we can. But, and just like, you know, like refining the storyline just so it's more clear, like as clear as possible. You know, and that's the biggest thing. Like after every single one of these iterations at Wagner, at the New York Theater Festival, at this, we just ask people for feedback. You know, it's just like we just ask them questions. What did you think of this? Was this clear? What part didn't you like? And just constructive criticism. And we just take that and we look at it all and be like, all right, well, this came up 10 times. We should probably look at that. And then some other ones that like one person said, we're like, well, everyone else gets it. We're going to leave that one alone. You know, so it's just really just a balance.
Yeah, I feel like the feedback is tough, like especially when it's like for me and Leigh, it's like we also run a musical and we're like, this is our baby. And then someone says something and you're like, no, that's the best part of the show. We're not cutting it. Like, no way in hell. But I think that's the hardest thing is cuts. Because you're just like, but I love that dialogue. Or like that song hits so hard. Like, how am I going to make it shorter? Or, you know, anything like that. You're just like, it can, like, it can be tough to.
I was going to ask the both of you about that, because I think that's honestly like the hardest part for me throughout this whole process. And like, just to say this before I say it, is that I am super proud of this production that we have done at Theater Row. Like, we couldn't have asked for a better team. Like from our actors to musicians to tech people to stage management people. Like, they have been absolutely incredible. It's been like
a dream.
One of the best like creative joys of my life. But I also, there's this sense of like every time we get up on stage to do it, it's like, oh my God, like there's 100 new people in this room that are watching it and are going to, you know, get what they want out of it or pick it apart in different ways. And like, I think I'm still like not over that yet. Like, I haven't found a way to like be numb to that because it is your baby, like you said, you know? So I'd be interested like how you guys feel about that. You know, when you present like this thing that you've been working on forever to people, and then they, you know, they give you the feedback.
Well, listen, I can answer that super easily because Ellie knows the answer to this. So one of the things that's nice about when we did The Flames, like you put it out as a podcast, right? So we had, when we first released, like when the episodes were releasing every week, we did listening parties. We would do like Zoom parties. We'd have people come on and we'd like all listen to it together and do some Q&As and stuff afterwards. But those were all people that we knew were going to love the show, right? Everyone else, like, we're not there. We're not there. We don't get to hear them. And so for me, the worst thing ever was when we did the show at 54 Below. We did a show of all the music, which as the person who wrote all the music, and then I had to have people come up to me in person and like telling me how much they loved the show or which songs they loved or this and that. And I was just like, I need to leave. I can't be here. So my answer is easy. I'm bad at it. I'm really bad at it.
Yeah.
I don't have any advice. I am not good at that part of creation still.
Yeah.
So Ellie's better at it.
Well, no, I think, yeah, Leigh's more like, she doesn't like the spotlight in general. So like, can't relate to that. But we did so Leigh wasn't there for this, but I went to Western Mass and we did like a short reading of like one scene of The Flame, right? So we did this one scene and it was like people were giving all this feedback and it was only one scene from the whole show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like people were giving feedback that was like, I don't know, like I can't even remember the feedback, but I do remember I was getting really frustrated and I was like, it was like they're giving feedback and like the whole point of it was for me to like respond and be like, oh, thank you for your feedback. And I was like good about it, but definitely
Ellie's throwing hands.
Internally, I was like, you just don't get it. You know what I mean? Like I was like,
it's so hard out of context.
If you would have seen the scene before this and whatever, you know what I mean? Like I'm like,
right.
You really like, because for us, it's like everything is in. But I think after like, I would take some of it and brought it back to the creative team and was like, okay, here's some of the feedback. Like you said, where you're like, here's feedback that like seems constructive, right? This is something that seems like maybe this is something we should take a look at. And other stuff where you're like, sometimes also like, that's not your audience, right? So it's like,
totally.
Right? Like there's two things where it's like, I mean, there are musicals that like are beloved by everyone and someone's like, I hate that musical. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like the name of the game, right?
That's
like
a really good point as well. Yeah.
So I think for me, it's like trying to compartmentalize of like, okay, they're just not the right person for this show.
Well,
you know what I mean? More so than like, I'm going to take that feedback to the heart, if that makes sense.
Maybe one other thing I will say as well, because it is something that I know I said a lot during The Flame. I'm saying it now as we're working on our next musical, and that I still believe, and it's interesting to me now to go back to The Flame, knowing it so much more, I think, than I did at the time, is like one of the hardest things for me when we worked on writing The Flame, when I was writing the music for it, is like I didn't have a workshop. I didn't have the ability, you know, it's like we had our little team. I would bring songs back and play them for people. And our little team of the four of us and the other three people would all go, oh my God, great, I love it. And I was like, could someone please give me a note once? Like somebody change something, because even I am not conceited enough to believe that like every single thing I am doing is the best it could be. Like just by the grace of God, every time I nailed it. I'm like, no, like there's gotta be something, and no one's telling me what it is. And I think it's why, honestly, like it's why I think I'm still very insecure about listening to The Flame and the music in it, because I'm like, I know there's feedback out there somewhere that I should be getting and should be having. And it's like, and I know it even more now because I can even tell, just having written another musical now, that I'm like, oh, I've grown as a songwriter, right? Like I can see it in myself. And so that means I know I could go back and be okay with getting feedback on stuff that that really I actually kind of would love to have the opportunity to get. So like, I think I'm sure I'm going to be terrible at it when it happens, the same way that we all will be when it's our babies. But I also think there's something so really important and powerful about being able to put it in front of other people and taking a step back, putting the wall up and just being like, yes, please actually give some notes and give some criticism and help us make it the best thing that it can be,
Right.
because it's hard now for me to just be like, nobody ever gave me a note. I changed not a single thing. I fixed nothing. I'm like, it's whatever happened the first time through. And I'm like, that's probably not actually the best idea. So
I think
good on you for already having taken, like, you know.
I think our rule has always been like, if we're getting like multiple people saying the same thing, then we know that we have to address it.
Yep.
But
Yes.
if like someone, another person said that they wanted to see more LGBTQ representation in our show, and I'm like, I don't know how to help you with that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this show is about, it's a queer love story. Like, what does that mean? And so
we always grapple with that as well, because like, obviously when we're holding auditions, we're not asking people's sexual orientations, it's like, you guys
you
are
actually
perfect for this
legally
part.
cannot.
Exactly.
So, like, we
It's like-
can't.
Right.
You can't ask that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like, regardless, it's just like, you guys were the right fit for these roles, that's the end of the story. It's about the story. It's not, I don't want to say it's not about who's on stage, because obviously we need representation, but like, it's not just about who's on stage. It's about who are the writers, who are the team. Like, probably more than half our team is gay or something, It's just like, there's plenty of representation in our show, It's just some people that just see who's in front of them.
Yes.
But
I
part
love
of it.
that advice though, of saying like, hey, look, if it starts, the numbers are climbing, like maybe it's a valid no, otherwise kind of let it roll off you. Like it's
the
like
only way to
And
survive. Like, you can't take everyone's feedback, then your show will be a jumble.
I was going to say, this one guy, I stand in the back of the theater at the end of the show, and this one guy came up to me at the end. He was just like, I couldn't hear what his sickness was, so the whole show, I was confused. And I was just like, well, you just missed it. Like, it was there. Like, we addressed it, so you just missed it, sorry.
I feel like, that's a you problem.
No, could you please say it repeatedly and frequently throughout the show? I think that's the most important part.
And also, like, speaking of our actors, I feel like we were just like completely blessed with the actors that we have, because they honestly, when talking about feedback, like, I trust their feedback more really than anyone, because they're like living with these roles, and they just have been. I think it was a really good rehearsal process, because they would challenge us on stuff and say, why did you write this way? And then I would have to sort of like go back and think about why I did,
But the first time that happened, I was just like,
what do you mean?
What do you mean? It was
You're like, I took the pen and I made words on paper.
I relish in that. Like, if an actor says that to me, like, I think I'm like in heaven. I love that. Because I want to be able to have that conversation about, how did we get to this point, and how can we translate it to like your performance, right? And if we're having trouble getting to that point, then is it on us as the writers to go back and change something because we didn't get it right the first time, right? And so that feedback to me is like absolutely critical. And so just I can't say enough about,
or maybe we didn't
actors.
get it right the 10th time and we have to do it again.
Exactly. But I can't say enough about them. They've been incredible for this whole process.
Before we sign off, you are running the show right now, correct? So what's happening with the run currently?
So we have 5 more performances: Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday matinee night, and Sunday matinee. And then we close, and we're working on the next steps.
Exciting. And it's been pretty successful so far, right?
I
would say so.
At the end of the day, it probably, you could say it was like 95% sold, which is amazing.
Amazing.
Like, we couldn't
awesome.
ask for anything more,
Yeah.
So
that is awesome.
Yeah. So
congratulations on that. Yeah,
thank you
super
so
pumped
much
for you.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to tell our listeners, either like about the show or just any advice you have for them if they are LGBTQ creators, stuff like that?
I think I honestly do think the advice I could give is like, I don't think that every single writer, whether they identify as LGBTQ or not, like you're going to have your own identity and your own experience when you're coming into, you know, writing whatever it is, a play, a musical, you know, book, whatever. And I think that it's super important to whatever it is that you are writing is that you can personally connect to it, because then you are able to personally say like, no, I did write it this way because this is why,
right.
and XYZ. And so, you know, it's hard to, you know, like as we've been talking about, you know, feedback and all this stuff throughout the episode, is that if you can back up like why you did something and why you wrote it the way that you did because of an experience that you had, then that makes the piece like more truthful in itself, you know. And it may be hard for an audience member or for somewhere else to accept that truth of something that happened. But I think that's why theater is like such a great art form, because you can tell those like intense and important stories in that way.
As Rosa from Tick Tick Boom says, write what you know.
You're the worst. You're literally the worst.
Charlie, get Hal Prince on the line. We've been saying that all week.
Beautiful. All right. Well, that was a wonderful ending to lead us into our Q&A. So we're going to ask you some multiple choice or yes or no questions. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Oh my God, yes.
All right.
I've never been more ready for anything in my life.
Q and gay.
Question number 1, the hardest question. Have you ever fallen in love with your best friend? A, yes, or B, no?
Who goes first?
Whoever wants. Chris, you can go first.
That's a deep question, but I would say overall no. But
no with the question mark. That's a very gay answer.
I'm also gonna say no, but mine's more firm, I think, than Billy's.
Like, how do you define love, really, though? Like,
and how do you define best friends? Yeah.
Is that really? Okay, great.
Okay, question 2. What's your favorite 2-person musical out of A, The Last 5 Years, B, John and Jen, C, I Do, or D, Straightforward?
Straightforward. But if that wasn't a choice, the last 5 years.
No pressure.
I can't. I feel like I can't pick our own musical. Like that would just be like the worst.
I'm shameless.
So then I'll balance this
You're
out.
more than allowed to.
I'm gonna say. So I'll say The Last 5 Years then.
You know, we both took a lot of
Fair
inspiration
enough.
from Jason Robert Brown. So
Yeah, the musical is very Jason Robert Brown in a good way. Like the music.
Thank you.
The act. Yeah,
Thank you.
It's very good. All right. Question number 3. If you were going to tell a queer story, how would you do it? A, write a book. B, make a movie. C, write a musical. Or D, TV show.
I think we're gonna have to go with C.
I would say
It's musical. Also, I will say we put these up for our listeners as well, so they're like a little.
Got
they're a little broad.
Okay.
There's also no wrong answers.
Got it.
That's the rule of the Q&As. Okay. Question 4. Do you prefer A, intimate shows, or B, big productions?
Intimate for sure.
We're talking like
Theater.
theatrical.
Yeah, theater.
There's
Intimate.
Yeah,
What
intimate.
what else?
There's nothing. Listen, a big flashy musical is always nice, but those intimate scenes where you just leave and you're like, holy shit! Like I have a lot of experiences like that, and those are way more powerful than like a big flashy musical number, to me.
Yeah.
All right. Our final question. Question number 5. What is your favorite queer musical? A, Fun Home. B, The Prom. C, Straightforward. Or D, The Flame.
I had to put it in there. Listen.
Equally
Yeah.
successful.
Equally matched.
musicals.
Very similar. Yes, exactly.
I mean, I just love The Prom. I watch it on Netflix like at least once a week. I just love it so much, and that's pretty flashy.
It is flashy. I love her. Like, I love
flashy,
intimate
yeah.
moments in The Prom.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with The Flame.
Oh,
And
yes.
but is that the last question?
Yes.
Yes.
I was gonna ask you a question.
Okay, great.
Am I
Yes,
allowed
you
to ask
can,
you a
yes.
question? Okay. Do you like Fun Home? Like, do you guys like that musical?
Good question.
Do you want us to answer that? there are things I like about Fun Home and there are things I really dislike about Fun
I'm
Home.
the same. Yeah.
Okay.
And I will say I have never seen it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I agree.
I wish I liked the music more. I wish I did.
Chris is like,
I always feel like I'm
disagree.
such a bad gay when I say that. I'm like, someone's gonna come take my lesbian card away from me.
We could do a
And it will be
separate
Alison
podcast.
Bechdel, and what am I gonna do? Can't fight her.
Yeah, you
can't argue with
honestly.
her.
Alison Bechdel that's the top.
She's got way more sway than I do. Like, she could take my card, and the council won't fight her. You know.
I know. I do feel so bad that I've literally never seen it.
It's one of my favorites, but I just felt when I said it at the beginning of the podcast, there was a lull. So I wanted to know what the lull was about. You know what? I don't know. Maybe
You felt it.
You're like, I said Fun Home to these two lesbians, and no one said anything. What's happening?
To these two musical lesbians also too. Where I'm like, that's like such a faux pas. Yeah.
I love the story of Fun Home, and I love the book, like the writing, the lines, dialogue. There's a lot of stuff in it that I do like. But yeah, we can continue. We'll continue off air.
Continue off air. All right. I will stop this before the lesbian mafia comes for us. But
I know, God, what is it? We keep getting them on
We
our
do.
on
We
our
always
tail.
get them
We're
on
not
us.
doing
They're just
well.
going to charge through your door, Ellie.
yeah, exactly. Like everyone else in this house. They're here. I have to go. I have to run.
I don't know how they found you.
They found me.
They know.
I've been hiding in this cabin and they finally found me. But yes, Chris and Billy, thank you so much for hanging out with us. It was so good to see both of you. I cannot
too.
wait to see where Straightforward goes next.
And thanks for having us.
Thank you so much
we
for
really
having us.
appreciate it. It was so much fun. Definitely one of the more energy and fun ones that we've done, which I love. So
That's our vibe. That is us.
Let me hear you say hip, 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 well, yeah.
We love hearing from all of you. We love continuing to build this community. So we just like to shout out some of our favorite things every episode. This week, we'd like to shout out first user on Instagram, Emery Krog, who commented on our Jolene episode to say they love the episode and love Dolly. And I mean, same.
Don't we all?
Yes.
I'd also like to shout out Orlando Sooner, who's been commenting on our page and also sent me a beautiful birthday message that said, I hope you had an amazing birthday. Belated, that's okay. Have a great year filled with lots of lesbian fun. And I feel like that message manifested my whole year. So thank you, Orlando Sooner.
We also want to shout out what I thought was great on some of our TikToks. Our Grease episode TikToks have been, people seem to like them. I don't
Because
disagree.
Grease is gay as hell.
Yes, and my favorite is someone commented on one of our Grease TikToks, user Goglor, commented, I have already sent this video to several of my friends with the caption, quote, the lesbians have fixed Grease in all caps. So you're welcome.
You're welcome.
You're welcome, everyone.
We are the lesbians who fix Grease. That should be our new tagline. Let's hang out. Lesbians who fix Grease.
There we go.
As always, I want to thank our Lesbian Jesus patrons, Mark Foster,
Tanya Ferguson,
Alana Rosen,
Lizette Stye,
Adi Benitez,
Fiona W.,
and Sophia Phillips.
and our King Princess patrons, Amy and Ellen,
Leah Henley,
Andrea Doucette,
and Julia Gonzalez. Thank you so much for supporting us. We could not continue to make this show without you and all of our patrons.
Remember, you can find us on all the social medias. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at Let's Hang Out Pod.
You can email us at letshangoutpod@gmail.com.
You can check out our website at letshangoutpod.com.
Whatever app you use for podcasts, make sure you subscribe so you'll be the first to know when new episodes drop.
We also have videos going up on our YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe at youtube.com/letshangoutpod to catch those.
Let's Hang Out is an independently produced show hosted by us with audio production by me. Our production assistant is Kristen Murison, and Twitter shenanigans and various other shenanigans by Leigh Holmes Foster.
If you want to help support our little team, the first way that you can do that is easy. It's free. Leave us a rating and a review on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. We love reading the reviews, and it helps new people find the show.
If you want to support us on Patreon, we would be forever grateful. Our patrons are what help us pay for this podcast, pay for the independently produced team we were talking about above, which is really just the three of us. So you can join at bit.ly/lespatreon. We also give you access to bonus episodes. There are 12 bonus episodes up right now. So if you can't get enough of your Let's Hang Out and you're like, I need more, join our Patreon. We've got it there for you.
If you want to get some Let's Hang Out merch, all of our designs are available in our TeePublic store. You can get them on t-shirts, on tank tops, on sweatshirts, on all sorts of good stuff. You can find it at bit.ly/lesshop.
And remember, we have a queer production company making queer podcast musicals with guaranteed happy endings that you can find everywhere at $beanprod.
You can also check out our website, dollarbeanproductions.com.
You can listen to all of the episodes of our first show, The Flame, on any podcasting app.
And if you want to help support us in making more musicals, you can join our Patreon at bit.ly/dollarbeanpatreon. It is so helpful, and we are so close to our next show, Journey to the Heart, coming out so soon.
If you want to follow us individually, you can follow me at Ellie Brigida on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at LSH Foster.
With that, I'm Ellie.
And I'm Leigh. And let's hang out again soon.
Let's hang out.
Buffet brawlers, glory holes gone wrong, cannibalistic castration cabins, public poopers? These are just a few of the crazy topics you'll hear covered on Excuse Me, That's Illegal, the pettiest podcast around. Whether you need a break from all that murdery true crime stuff, or just enjoy hearing hilarious stories told in a unique way, I got what you need. I'm Leroy Luna, your fearless host/chauffeur. So come hop in my minivan and let's go for a ride. I promise you probably won't be disappointed. Excuse me, That's Illegal is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, basically everywhere you consume podcasts, with new episodes dropping on the 10th, 20th, and 30th of the month, baby!